There was fraud. We have proven that. Absentee ballot applications with the wrong middle name. Not sure why I got it, how they got my information, who's sending me this or why. Hi, my name is Amanda McGee, and my testimony is basically just about the absentee ballots and applications that I've received unsolicited. This is a ballot I received it was a circuit court runoff. Not sure why I got it, but I received an absentee ballot. These are absentee ballot applications with the wrong middle name. It says my correct first name, last name, and address, but the middle name is Lay, Amanda Lay McGee. My middle name starts with a D, and I wanted to point this out because this might explain some of the people that have voted multiple times in other states with similar or different names. So if I were a corrupt person, I could fill out this absentee ballot application and, receive the ballot with this incorrect middle name and then go and vote in person with my correct ID and middle name. So I just want to point that out, and I'm not sure who's sending me this or why. It looks pretty official. And it also corresponds with some of the junk mail that I've been receiving from Democrats with that same middle initial L. And also I wanted to point out that the Democrats have been to my house, knocking on my door. I'm not sure how they got my information, but I was speaking to someone about this. A mother, she has an 18-year-old daughter. You cannot register what party you're affiliated with. And I think that's a problem because it invites fraud. It allows the Democrats to lie and say that, oh, there's a blue wave, when we actually know that's not true. It's actually a red wave. And, I just would like to, someone to look into that on why we cannot register as a Republican or as a Democrat or what party we're affiliated with. And also, I just wanted to say that the Democrats actually need to be the ones proving that there was no fraud. We're working really hard to prove there was fraud. We have proven that. The Democrats need to prove their innocence and that there was no fraud, because we know that they can't do that. Thank you.
Tuesday, November 17th, I went to pick up the totals, and I was told by the supervisor that they were going to be using the election results, the same election result numbers, per the email from the Secretary of State. She handed me election results dated November 9th at 8:46 a.m. Spalding County came out with the same exact numbers during the hand count audit as they did for the election. Hi, my name is Ashley Gillis, and I am the Lamar County GOP chair. I also teach therapeutic riding for children with autism and disabilities. On Friday, October 13th, I was then credentialed as a vote review panelist for Spalding County during the hand recount audit. While I was in the lobby, I noticed where some men with book bags were wearing shirts that were labeled VOV. The insignia on their shirts and their book bags was very faint, yet noticeable. I asked them where they were from. They said they were from the Secretary of State's office. So I asked them a couple other questions to make sure that the answers would be congruent with protocol, and they were. I went back to my job as the vote review panel. Moments later, they came in, and one of the men pulled out SD cards. No presidential totals were coming back on the forms. Batch forms were incomplete, and the supervisor remarked that no totals were to be given until the Secretary of State released them. A witness in the other room told me that they were not able to observe the numbers being written down as they were all being tallied on notebook paper, and was told by the staff to keep them hidden. I reported this to the Georgia GOP and to the Secretary of State's office on the way home. I was asked by an investigator to make a statement which was not needed because later it came out that the Secretary of State sent these men for the forensic audit. On Saturday, there were still no presidential totals coming back, and multiple batch numbers were coming back as batch one. We were able to use the time they came back to differentiate between which batch one was supposed to be on this form. At that time, we were introduced to a man who was wearing the same insignia as the guys that came in the day before with the VOV. He was introduced as an Arlo employee. When I had questions about the forms not being filled out right, I motioned for the supervisor to bring the Arlo employee into the room so I could ask him about what was on the batch sheets. He said that they were not worried about the batch sheets at all. There was still, the whole day, there was no presidential totals. And then on Sunday, ballots were coming back for early voting that were on plain copy paper. That was not the weighted paper. The Arlo employee was still there, and he was the one that was entering numbers into the Arlo system. Tuesday, November 17th, I went to pick up the totals, and I was told by the supervisor that they were going to be using the election results, the same election result numbers, per the email from the Secretary of State. She handed me election results dated November 9th at 8:46 a.m. Again, that day was November 17th, and it was after 10. This whole process did not seem to coincide with the instructions given out by the Secretary of State. I spoke with Muskogee County Board of Election Supervisor Nancy, and she confirmed that what I witnessed was not congruent to her protocol for the hand audit. County employees were the ones entering the information into the Arlo system. This was also confirmed by Pike and Lamar County Board of Election officials. Spalding County had came out with the same exact numbers during the hand count audit as they did for the election. What concerns me is that ProVNV has a vested interest in Dominion products. Does helping with this audit violate ProVNV's contract with the FEC, as they are now also helping to input the numbers into a CISA and Voting Works software? As of today, I have not received an answer as to why Spalding County was not in charge of inputting the numbers into the Arlo software like every other county. In Lamar County during the primaries, we witnessed a problem with the Dominion voting equipment. Apparently, one of the Dominion techs ran about 150 absentee ballots through a tabulation scanner twice after local tech Kimber Dean went home sick. The technician was fired. The Dominion executive arrived on Friday to help start over. This was a highly contested race. We had to run the ballots through after we discovered that we had more voters in a precinct, and that we came to the conclusion that they ran about 150 absentee ballots through. The Dominion tech arrived on Friday to help and started the whole recount over. He determined that the fired tech had also not cleaned the scanner as he should have after every 500 ballots. That was our reason that the numbers kept flipping. We ran them through once, we ran them through again, they came out different. We ran them through a third time, it came out different. This concerns me because there was multiple people that reported this. With the Secretary of State's office back in the primary, we knew we had problems with these machines in the primary. The Secretary of State's office let Dominion handle these glitches. Stevens County also experienced the same thing, and it was deemed that they needed a machine lens clean. After 500 ballots, as we were told by the Dominion tech, that is impossible. And I want to know how many of these machines were cleaned after 500 ballots were ran through.
Our votes have been stolen. There was obstruction. We have had a lot of problems with the military ballot watermark. Their numbers were almost identical to Cobb County, statistically almost impossible. I'm Debbie Fisher from Cobb County, and I, on November 16th, was a member of the voter review panel during the hand recount. And I'd like to talk to you about some things that I observed during that period of time that were greatly disturbing. During the review panel, I reviewed 298 military ballots on November 16th. One thing after I had seen several that I noticed was they were exceptionally clean. I was comparing them to the ballots that I had seen during the general election that didn't even come close to comparing to these ballots. What I found was there were bubbles on the ballots that were filled in perfectly. There was almost none that went outside the lines. There were no stray marks like we found on the ballots during the general election, such as X's or check marks. Not one ballot that I looked at had any kind of markings other than black. The circles were perfectly colored in. There were two blue ballots marked with blue, Thus, all of a sudden, it dawned on me that maybe these circles weren't filled in exactly as they should have been by hand. Maybe they were printed. So I challenged those ballots. At that period, I asked to speak to the elections director. I was told that the ballots cannot be marked by a machine because the military ballots in Cobb County had to be mailed. I later found out that just wasn't true. I found that out during the recount when I found a box that was marked military ballots, and I asked for the numbers on those ballots, to which I was given those. And it was funny because almost every single one of the ballots we received back were received electronically, thus proving that elections director, Janine, wasn't quite telling the truth. While I was looking through the ballots, I did a mental calculation on what I saw. And I'm not saying I'm 100% right, but I have a fairly good calculator in my head. And I estimated somewhere between 80 and 90% of the ballots from the military were marked for Joe Biden. And when I started over and over going through these batches and seeing Biden, 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 even stacks of these ballots that were 100% Biden, the batch probably 3 were 100% Biden. I almost cried. Of all the votes, of all the people in this country, to have their votes disregarded or to fraudulently submit a ballot for the very men and women who fight to give us the right to vote, it made me physically sick to my stomach. Another thing I noticed on these ballots as I was going through, it was about halfway through the day when all of a sudden this ballot stood out with a watermark that was dark gray. It wasn't transparent. It wasn't even semi-transparent. It was solid gray, Uakava. I asked them to stop. I wanted to look at the entire ballot. It was solid gray. So I challenged that ballot. Janine Evler came over and she told me, oh no, these things are all printed on different printers. It's just that particular printer. Then I found 3 more that apparently were printed from that same printer. And I called it out again and I asked for these ballots to be investigated or thrown out. Because after you've looked at dozens and dozens of them, you know what a watermark looks like. However, she overruled me and told me to take it up with the Secretary of State, which I did. I filed a fraud report on those 3 ballots with the Secretary of State, and shamefully, all I received back from them was, thank you for filing your report. December 1st, when we were back to do the recount, on the military boxes that I saw, I noticed that they were fairly light in weight, and that's because of the numbers. So I actually did an open records request asking what the counts, individual counts, for the military ballots were. Now, mind you, I was told before when I challenged it and asked for the tallies at the end of the day, we can't give you that. We don't actually tally the military votes separately. However, miraculously, under an open records request, I did get the numbers. Total requests were 2,298. Total returned, 1,826. Not returned, 470. Returned by deadline, 1,782. And then a handful returned after the deadline. 48 were rejected for one reason or another. 87 of those were challenged, and 4 had invalid signatures. The interesting thing during the recount, machine recount, was that there were only 1,401 ballots. What happened to the other 300 and change out of the 1826. How do we go from 1826 to 1401? There was no answer. During the process of calculating the 80 to 90%, when I was having a discussion with a fellow monitor, someone actually overheard my discussion. And this was an election worker. She later came up to me and she said, I just want to tell you that we have had a lot of problems with the military ballot watermark. I had another person tell me who did work the fraud line that they had call after call where people could not print the ballot with the watermark. Why not? How could that happen? It's supposed to be embedded in that document. Those answers have yet to be given. As we went through this whole process, I will say that every time that there was a challenge, it was almost as if the supervisors at the election took it personally from the get-go. And I worked the general, I worked the hand recount, I worked the machine recount. People talk about obstruction, they talk about rudeness, they talk about whatever, but I can honestly tell you there was obstruction. The information we were given to get in the building wasn't even close to what we actually ended up having to do. When we got there, the proper paperwork wasn't available, so a lot of us were not let in when, in fact, the paperwork had been given. So as I'm waiting as a public observer versus a monitor, I decided to go into the room where they were doing signature verification. I was kicked out. So I went into the next room, which is where they were actually processing absentee ballots. And that is where the voter review panel was. I asked, why don't we have monitors in here? You aren't allowed to have a monitor in the voter review panel. And so I challenged that. Well, come to find out, I went back in there and I see 3 people walking around that look like, to me, they may be Democrats. So I asked the supervisor, are the Democrats allowed to have monitors, yet Republicans aren't? No, there's no Democrats in here. I said, well, who is that monitoring these tables? Oh, well, let me check. They came back, and all of a sudden, I was able to be a monitor in the voter review panel. When we came back the second day, we were told, no, that wasn't right. You cannot go in there and monitor. You can only stand as a public observer. At that point, I went and got Janine Evler. It was immediately cleared up. But things like that happened day after day after day, where they tried to obstruct us. And I never saw that happen with the Democrats. In closing, I would like to say that there are many laws that need to be changed on the entire election process. I won't go into my opinion about the voting machines themselves, but I do want to recommend to our legislators and all of the election registrars across the state of Georgia, I find it very, very important that we process new laws on how military ballots are processed. Right now, they're sent an electronic copy of a ballot. They print it out on an 8x11. Supposedly, they fill in the dots. Well, that's not necessarily true. There is a way to machine mark them. They print them out, sign them, scan them, and send them back electronically. There's a packet that they have to fill out to verify that they are who they say they are. Currently, I do not believe those items are being saved. I don't believe the emails are put in the archives for 24 months to make sure that those were actually military people voting. I do not believe that it is fair that they are doing the duplicates by election workers outside of the voter review panel. I've heard that testimony over and over again in other counties as well. Those should be done only, duplicates done only by voter review panels. The military in all of our counties should be separated out and a tally given. Out of the 159 counties, only one provided through the Secretary of State showed military ballots. And guess what? Their numbers were almost identical to Cobb County. I'm not saying that it isn't just a coincidence, but it's statistically almost impossible. I also believe that all electronic communication, whether it's the email sending the ballot, whether it's the envelope that they are supposed to fold, it's actually a piece of paper in the military, they fold it, they put a piece of tape on it, and they mail it, those should be saved. Just like the security envelope on the absentee ballot should be saved. It is part of the ballot packet. And with that, I would just close and I would say that our votes have been stolen. And we keep hearing there was no fraud. And I'm here to tell you that is not true. I witnessed it myself.
The overwhelming majority of auditors were not following this procedure. They were independently sorting and counting their own vote piles without the verification and communication piece, as the auditors were greatly frustrated and annoyed that we were checking their work. My name is Kelly Moore. I'm a resident of DeKalb County. I voted early and in person at the Linwood Recreation Center in Brookhaven. Leaving the voting booth with my printed ballot, I approached the polling scanner desk and observed that there were 2 scanners on the table. The poll worker official asked me if my ballot code ended in a 3 or a 4 and directed me to place my ballot in the right scanner based on the number at the end of my printed ballot. To clarify, my printed ballot was placed in the scanner based on the ending number on the ballot. DeKalb County Board of Elections and Registrations has yet to provide a transparent answer for the purpose of the 2 scanners on the table. On November 14th, I was assigned to monitor the hand count at Lithonia Voting Facility in DeKalb County. I was scheduled to watch from 1 to 5 p.m. As a monitor, I observed irregularities at nearly every table. Most notably, auditor pairs were not following procedures. Auditor A was supposed to read the candidate's name printed on the ballot out loud, pass to Auditor B. Auditor B was supposed to verbally confirm the name on the ballot and sort ballots accordingly into piles. The overwhelming majority of auditors were not following this procedure. They were independently sorting and counting their own vote piles without the verification and communication piece. Once piles were complete, auditors were supposed to count each ballot in groups of 10, stacking each 10 ballot pile at 90-degree angles to be tallied in tens at the end. In the orange section, auditors were again counting independently without passing to their partner to verify the number of ballots being counted. One auditor was counting votes for President Trump. I observed him place irregular amounts of ballots into the 10 ballot stacks. He was not counting out loud. I had to try to count the number of ballots he was adding to the stack with my own eyes. I would say it's fraudulent to intentionally dilute votes for any candidate trying to pass off a count of 16 ballots in a 10 ballot stack, or sometimes 13 ballots as 10 for President Trump's pile only. Our group of monitors brought these concerns to a supervisor, and others in my group observed the same counting methods at a handful of other tables once we picked up on this very discreet method of diluting ballots. We were met with hostility and asked, why are we trying to cause malice, as the auditors were greatly frustrated and annoyed that we were checking their work. Finally, in the orange section at table 7, I witnessed 2 auditors get up to leave for the end of their shift at 3:30 p.m. They signaled to a supervisor that they were leaving and stated that the box of ballots left on the table was incomplete. I stayed in the area to observe, and about 5 minutes after the auditors left the table, the auditors left the box of ballots alone at the table. Someone attempted to come by with a rolling cart and place it on the cart. He began taping it up, and I uncomfortably interjected as we were told not to speak or interact with anyone. And I was able to inform the gentleman that the box was incompletely counted. He proceeded to continue to tape it up before a supervisor called over saying that box is incomplete. He left the box on the table, and I was not able to stay long enough to see what ended up happening to the box of ballots left behind. Aside from the overall irregularities in not following procedures and overt ballot count dilution for President Trump votes only in the orange section in the Lithonia recount, the absentee ballots at each auditor's table were pristinely and uniformly filled out, as well as completely flat, unfolded, and unscored. We were told that we were not allowed to verify signatures on the absentee ballots. The Secretary of State's office continues to assert that absentee ballots have to be requested. I received 4 unsolicited absentee ballot registration forms in the mail just this week, as did my husband as well. Who are these third parties soliciting absentee voter registers? How are these third parties regulated, and why are they allowed to send out innumerable registration forms to individuals who have not asked for them nor requested them?
You know, here I am, I'm observing all of this, and I'm just shaking my head. I'm like, this is America? How is this allowed to be happening? And why not be transparent? When I first got there, okay, of course, I was with the Republican Party, which, of course, we had to identify when we showed up there. All Republicans that showed up to observe or to review ballots were segregated from the rest. Election staff that were monitoring this situation were less than cooperative with us. However, any Democrats that came in were just ushered right in, no problems at all. They were given their badges. The other thing that I thought was very, very curious was when they started counting the mail-in ballots. Now, with the mail-in ballots, you know, of course, they're just putting them into the scanners and they're scanning them. But what I started to see was a lot of mail-in ballots with no folds in them, no creases, nothing. Now, I brought this to the attention of one of the monitors there, and I was taken out and I was instructed that if I questioned anything that they were doing, I would be asked to leave. And I did notice that on a number of occasions, especially when Republican observers brought into question any anomalies in the ballots or in the method of counting or anything, they were escorted out by a policeman. Now, what they said was that, well, any provisional ballots or ballot copies were made on the same on that same form, so they would come as without creases or anything. And then I looked at the numbers, and provisional ballots, they numbered in Clayton County about 500, give or take. The number of mail-in ballots I saw that had no creases on them, didn't see the inside of an envelope, were thousands. Thousands. And the ballot copies that they made, which were allegedly on the same form, were segregated. They were put in separate envelopes and kept somewhere else. So my question is how thousands of mail-in ballots would not have any creases at all. And we saw a number of times where the workers, Dominion worker would come in, like one morning we went in there, but I was standing to the side and I was looking at them as they were coming in and setting the scanners up to scan the ballots and stuff. And the supervisor was with the Dominion worker, and I saw them putting in flash drives into the monitor scanner units. And I looked at him, and I stepped aside, and I was watching him, and they caught me and my other Republican observer watching them. And I promise you, I heard him tell the Dominion worker, which I have a picture of, telling him that 2 ought to be enough. We don't have to do the third one. And they walked out. You know, here I am, I'm observing all of this, and I'm just shaking my head. I'm like, this is America? My father came across 95 miles of shark-infested waters for his children, us, to realize the American dream. And here we are, our electoral process has become the same as you would see in a typical banana republic. How is this allowed to be happen? And if it didn't happen, if there were no questions, if there was no ballot fraud or anything like that, why not be transparent? Why not come, here are the books, we're opening the books for anybody to observe? Why be so secretive, especially during the ballot observation process?
Military ballots cannot be read by the scanners. That continually had me questioning they're anonymous. There was no system or physical controls in place. How the duplication of the absentee and military ballots did not have witnesses. Hello, my name is Marcy McCarthy. I am a successful businesswoman in the cybersecurity industry. I was elected as a 2020 national delegate for the Republican National Convention, and the outer and inner envelopes had been separated by the time the VRP received their ballots. There was an inherent bias in the VRP once working as a single body. The VRP is to determine the voter's intent and is to be done so in a bipartisan manner. During the combined presidential primary and runoff elections, the VRP was comprised of a Republican and a Democrat, and it was truly bipartisan. However, during the general special election, the VRP in DeKalb County was comprised of 4 people, 1 Republican, 1 Democrat, and 2 nonpartisans. The nonpartisans were represented by the League of Women Voters, which officially claims to be nonpartisan in that they don't support a candidate or the party itself. However, it does support a variety of progressive public policy positions that are in direct alignment with the Democrats' party political platform, to include universal health care, abortion rights, climate change action, and gun control. So essentially, the VRP composition during the general special election in DeKalb County was comprised of 1 Republican and 3 Democrats. Although the Georgia Secretary of State's office authorized a start date of October 19, 2020, the VRP panels in DeKalb County did not commence their work till October 28, 2020. From October 28, 2020 to November 1st, 2020, the 4-person VRP was operating as 2 separate VRPs. In that, there was no Republican nor Democrat participating in the VRP for the special Senate election, as we only analyzed the general election components of the ballot. But during this time frame, over 800 ballots were put into a system quarantine mode that was sent to the nonpartisan VRPs without any oversight or controls. And this was done vice versa with the Republican-Democrat VRP. This was done to expedite the workflow of the VRPs due to the high volume of the paper absentee ballots. The delayed start that was there, and the fact that there was 1 panel comprised of the nonpartisans. We had 5 to 7 VRP panels that were bipartisan. Much of the adjudication was done via the computers, as the ballots could be scanned but could not be processed due to an imperfection. This could be a simple hesitation mark, a write-in candidate added, or just an overvote. But unlike the earlier elections, the elections office worker could perform the adjudication via computer at the direction of the VRP on the scanned ballot image. We would have to go into a special room that had a paper logbook where we signed in and out of the secure area. In the general special election, the system adjudication was done with minimal supervision from the election supervisor, and the changes to the ballots was done independently by the 2 VRPs for 5 days. There was no system or physical controls in place, nor there was an audit trail to protect the decisions made by either VRP as the ballots go into the system computer quarantine mode. Essentially, there was no way to lock the scanned ballot when being viewed on a computer. So whomever was the last VRP to review the ballot would transmit it to be completed, which cast the ballot. But during that quarantine mode, the VRP can still edit the previous VRP's work when that ballot, again, is in quarantine. Because the nonpartisan VRPs were mostly operating independently for 5 days, and the most common error was the special Senate election race being an overvote where the voter would vote for all 5 of the Democrat candidates, there was an untethered opportunity to award that overvote to Raphael Warnock, as there would be no audit trail that showed a modification and who made that change and when that change was made. There were no changes in the procedure until I expressed my grave concerns to Lane Flynn, who is the DeKalb GOP chairman, and I communicated this on October 29, 2020, following my VRP shift, as again, the most common error that I observed with the ballots in the special election category was the overvote of all 5 Democrat senatorial candidates. I would like to mention to all of you that the computers being used by the VRP to review the ballots were signed in by various DeKalb election office personnel, all seemingly sharing the same user IDs. There was no possible way to track who actually logged into any of the computers, and more specifically, what VRP sat at them. The lack of physical and system controls was truly astounding to me. Other than receiving an authorization letter from either the affiliated political party that being sworn in at the time of your first shift, there were 0 records being maintained. There were no checks and balances in the absentee ballot authentication process, and there's no defined escalation procedure when there was not a unanimous decision, because there was no creation of the chief vote panel, which was also outlined in our state constitution. Rather, that role was done on an ad hoc basis by an election supervisor. My final area of concern occurred on November 4th, 2020, during my 12 to 4 p.m. shift, where my VRP, now working as a single group, was asked to review a paper set of ballots. The 4-person VRP came across a ballot that clearly had gotten wet and the ink had run. After a careful inspection of the ballot, the one Democrat, 2 nonpartisans, and myself were in disagreement around that voter's intent. 3 were favoring a vote for Raphael Warnock, and 1 was against. As the sole Republican, I was outnumbered. Due to my strong dissent with the decision, we sought the advice and knowledge of the election office supervisor to determine how to do a correct resolution on how to handle a vote when we needed to escalate our decision. Acting as a chief vote review panelist, the supervisor ruled in favor, siding with the 3 VRPs, 1 that was a Democrat, 2 that were nonpartisan, presumably 3 Democrats. My testimony demonstrates that there was not a bipartisan VRP in the general special election in DeKalb County. We failed in advocating and protecting the voters' intent on many occasions. There was human errors, system and communication breakdowns that continually had me questioning the integrity of our election process in Georgia. Furthermore, it is evident from my firsthand account from serving on a VRP representing the Republicans, there was significant bias in the coordination of the Democrats taking the lead on scheduling the VRPs for themselves and with the nonpartisans. Combined with a dereliction of duties, including inadequate communications and a bias from Erica Hamilton, who is the top DeKalb election official, along with her staff.
I spoke to many voters who were getting harassed, from out of state even. Secretary of State thinks that the counties are all doing their jobs, but they are not. Many had instances where voters were directed to machines and their printed ballots did not scan. My name is Pamela Reardon. I'm a realtor, but I work on campaigns and I'm involved in the Georgia Republican Party. I live in Marietta. I'm a state committee person for the 6th District and a national delegate. I was the past first vice chair of Cobb County GOP and got poll watchers and trained them for the special elections in 2017 and the regular election in 2018 in Cobb County. I have lots of experience with poll watching and monitoring recounts, absentee ballots, opening and scanning, and panels for ballot adjudication. I was involved in the primary this year and the runoff in Paulding County, as well as a candidate recount in the primary in Cobb. Then the poll watching in Cobb County for the general on November the 3rd. I was involved in a recount after or 2 days before Thanksgiving in DeKalb County. Both in Paulding County and Cobb County, I sat in a room to watch the ballot opening and separation and putting the ballots down on a stack ready to be scanned through the machines. We sat in that room, and not once could we go into the other room, in the private room, where they were supposed to be verifying signatures on the outside envelopes. They always came in the stacks in the room we were in, and that part of the envelope was separated already. Upon asking, they always said no, we couldn't do that. This happened in Paulding County and Cobb County. So the most important part of this absentee ballot process, I believe, is that signature verification. And especially this time, we had such a low percentage of ballots getting discarded because of no match signatures. The counties, I believe, did not really match the signatures. They were overwhelmed with ballots and let the match slide. If the request is fraudulent, then matching that fraudulent ballot is of no purpose. So we need to insist that these ballots, we can monitor these signature verifications, and these ballots have to be matched to the e-file and not the application for future elections, and especially in this runoff for January the 5th. For immediate change, the SOS and the board has to mandate that monitors from both parties can sit and watch this process. This requires a bulletin. And as of yet, we've been asking, and we still have not had the bulletin released so that the information, this is by law, by the way, and that information has to go to the counties because they won't listen to us, any party. They have to have the directive from the top and from the Board of Elections. So we're still asking for that bulletin to be released for the January 5th runoff. The SOS Secretary of State thinks that the counties are all doing their jobs, but they are not. I helped answer the Georgia Republican Party fraud line for 3 weeks or more since the election, and we documented the hundreds and thousands of calls, and the attorneys got affidavits from disenfranchised voters. Certain counties are run better than others, but many had instances where voters were directed to machines and their printed ballots did not scan through the scanner. So they went into a secret box that was sitting there. So I don't know what happened to those ballots in that box and if they were ever scanned. So maybe those voters were disenfranchised because they didn't vote. Because I got many, many calls from people all over the state that were so worried once this all broke, they went and looked on my voter page and their vote didn't count because they voted early ballots or else in person, and they can find that out on the My Voter page. Unfortunately, if they go to the voter page, they cannot find out if their vote counted if they voted on Election Day. That has to be a different process that people don't understand. And all this information has to be readily available, in my opinion, on that site. People have to know that their vote counted. I spoke to many voters who were getting harassed, from out of state even, by Black Votes Matter to get their absentee ballots. A lot of these people were not registered in our state, but had lived in our state and maybe had lived in South Carolina, North Carolina, Alabama for 10 years, 5 years, 6 years. They were still getting texts to get their absentee ballots. So somewhere there's information out there that has to be cleaned up. I think that it's all the applications that have been sent by third-party companies, PACs, organizations, and I think that that should be illegal, and they should change that law in the next session in January. We got reports that many voters got multiple ballots. Some people think that those are applications, but some people actually did get multiple ballots.
Immediately came up to us and told us we were not allowed. I witnessed it with my own eyes, started the process without observers again. The young man disappeared and never showed up again. My name is Paula Davis, and I am a lifelong, born and raised Georgia resident and voter. I am very grateful for this opportunity to provide my testimony pertaining to the 2020 general election procedures and actions that I witnessed. After the general election took place on November 3rd, I was an observer at the DeKalb County Board of Elections office in Decatur, Georgia, from November 4th through November 8th. I was there every day, all day, until all election ballot counting process was completed. I observed all aspects of the ballot counting process. And during this time, I witnessed many what I think are irregularities, infractions, and illegal activities. Some general issues I observed during the week include: during the entire ballot counting process, observers were not allowed to stand close enough to hear or see what was happening at the tables. Many of the workers handling the ballots at the table were whispering and covering up the ballots so we could not see or hear what was happening. Also, all week, the scanning of all ballots took place in an enclosed, glassed-in back area. We were not allowed to be close enough to see or hear what was happening. The door was closed in the glassed area. Also, during this week, observers were treated in a very hostile, belligerent, and harassing manner by DeKalb County election officials and the temporary workers that were there working. Some of the workers even cursed at the observers every single time they got close to the table and treated them belligerently and harassing. In addition to these general issues that happened all week, there are some specific egregious activities that I witnessed throughout the week. On November 4th, around 8:30 in the morning, I arrived at the DeKalb County Elections Office to start observing. I, along with others, went to the room where the ballots were, and we were waiting in the front of the room to start observing. And an employee immediately came up to us and told us we were not allowed, made us leave the room, and locked us out of the room. On November 6th, while I was there observing the ballot duplication process, I observed a table that only had 2 employees duplicating the ballots instead of the required 3 employees that were supposed to be a part of the ballot duplication process. On November 7th, I arrived around 8:20 in the morning to start observing at 9 o'clock. They had told us 9 o'clock would be when the process would begin again. I got in line to get a name badge. The office was closed, could not get a name badge. So I went out to the warehouse where they were told us to report for the 9 o'clock observation. When I tried to walk into the area where they were doing the ballot processing, I was stopped by a DeKalb County employee and said I could not come in because I didn't have a name badge. I'm like, the office is closed. We can't get a name badge. Been closed for an hour. Well, you can't come in without a name badge. I observed through the fenced area they were already handing out ballots to their workers, processing them. So I asked her, you're going to continue without observers? She went and spoke to the lawyer that was on site. The lawyer came and talked to me and said, Ms. Davis, we are not actually going to start. We're just getting organized. They immediately put the ballots back in the secure cage and sat and waited for 45 minutes for observers to get there with name badges. If I had not been there, they were fully ready to begin that process without any observers. The very next morning, November 8th, I arrive around 9:45 out to the same warehouse area, same workers out there, and they have already started the process without observers again the very next morning. This was a pattern and a habit with them at the DeKalb County location. They were constantly, it seemed, delaying tactics so we could not come in to observe, and they flagrantly would violate that rule and that law. Also on November 8th, around 12:30, I observed a temporary employee rifling through the ballots inside a blue secure cage. When I inquired about that, they became very hostile, would not answer a question. The lawyer got there, and the young man disappeared and never showed up again. Not sure why he was rifling through those when he was not an official employee. Never got an answer for that question. The observations that I made while observing the 2020 general election were very great cause for me personally for alarm and concern for our election integrity. If these are not investigated and improved, I have no faith for the January 5th election to be fair and honest. We must have investigations, and I really am insulted when someone says to me there was no fraud. I witnessed it with my own eyes, so I feel like my elected officials are calling me a liar. All Georgians and all Americans should be alarmed at the massive evidence we have seen in fraud in this election. All Georgians and all Americans should want to get to the bottom of all of this wrongdoing and ensure our elections are fair and that our vote is honest, fair, and legal.
You are not.
Well, he gave me a hug, ma'am. Coincidentally, all of those did go for Biden.
Conditions. You are not.
There's no need to be rude to her.
I'm not being rude. No, ma'am. That's your interpretation. I'm simply asking her to give these people some space. I'm going to call it.
She just needs to be able to see it whether it's Biden or Trump, though. Otherwise, she has to be able to see if it's Biden or Trump. Otherwise,
6 feet away. That is not 6 feet.
your poll worker hugged her.
And she wasn't even wearing a mask.
Well, he gave me a hug, ma'am.
My
Your own
goodness.
worker. Okay. So
This
give
is
me
getting
a break.
ugly.
Okay, so hold on. Again, like I said, I've asked you to step 6 feet. I'm asking you to keep your mask over your tongue. Okay. Because we are required to stay socially distant. At this point, what Allison is saying is that whether you realize it or not, you keep encroaching on this.
Okay.
So I'm just asking you to stay like all the other observers.
Okay.
That's all we're asking.
Okay, so what we need to do is, Jerry, one of y'all, come over here and stand on this side where you can see the ones going into Trump. Get your glasses on, and I'll stand over here, and we'll be good.
Yes, that will be fine.
There you
Okay.
go. There's a solution.
Put your.
I'll be, that's fine. We'll just have two eyes, one for Trump and one for Biden. We'll see.
That's fine.
Okay.
But keep your mask over your nose so that we are
It
all.
keeps fogging my glasses, ma'am, so I can't see.
I understand.
That's the problem. But
I
thank you,
understand.
I'm good.
I have glasses as well. So.
Okay, guys, y'all watch here, I'll watch here. Okay, we're good.
Are you good?
Yeah, you got 2 seconds. I just.
I just wanted to make note that I got behind the rope and I got to stand next to a table, and I kept being asked to leave and that I couldn't stand close, and they didn't want me there, and I didn't give up. And when I stayed there at the end of the count from the guy in the yellow shirt from before, I ended up with Trump 705 and Biden 679. It was box 1423 at table 13. This is a corrupt system. Hi, I'm out here at Jim Miller Park. I'm with Sally. She has just finished being a monitor inside, and she's got a few things she'd like to tell us. Sally, tell us.
Okay, the first thing that I'd like to say is that the workers who are doing the sorting, there's not counting by the workers who are sorting the votes, but they are sorting the votes. They are contract workers. I saw a sign that said that if you were ill or whatever, you need to go back and report to your agency. I would like to know what agency these people are coming from. Secondly, what I observed was there's different paper weights and colors. Several tables that I saw, it was not me who brought it up, but the workers brought it up to their supervisor that said, do I count this, do I not count it? It didn't seem to fit in with the rest of the batch. I noted the locations that they came from, the time that it happened, and coincidentally, all of those did go for Biden.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
What time is it? Do you know what time is it?
It's 2:04 p.m. on Friday the 13th.
Great, thank you. Here I am at Cobb County, Jim Miller Park, Saturday, November the 14th. I'm looking at all of these boxes around me and people that are taping them up and taking out all of the pieces of paper and putting them in stacks, and people are counting, and I just have to question, you know, who's in charge of this and how is it all being validated? You need to ask yourself that. And now that I have been documenting in my black notebook every final white piece of paper count with how many Trump hand counted, how many Biden was hand counted, they're putting the final tally on this white sheet. That's what's being turned in, and now that I'm documenting every single white sheet, now they're turning them over as I come with my notebook. So every time I start to write the final tallies, they're now telling the people counting, flip that over now. So this is a fraud and ridiculous, and we're just going through the motions. We're Saturday, November the 14th at Jim Miller Park. Here is another letter that went out this morning, 11:14 at 7:02 a.m. to a woman who is an attorney, and she had signed up to be a monitor. She gets this morning. And then here is a manual that they sent her. And she said she doesn't know who to sign in with or anything that's going on. And she walked up to me and I said, I would like to get those and video those to show that obviously David Schaefer and our GOP did not want anyone showing up. I am just going back over a video I did to make sure that you all see the amount of names. And I am not sure who told people where to go or where not to go. I'm not accusing anybody of doing anything, but I do find it very interesting and odd that as of yesterday morning, there were 3 people from the Republican Party here when the woman who is head of elections, she said, we have the Democrat monitors and they're already in the bullpen, but we don't have any Republican, so I'm not sure where your group is. And with this amount of names, I can't imagine that there weren't a group of people here ready to go at 8 a.m. on Friday, November the 13th. I can tell you that watching the head election officials in front of me there and watching this gentleman watch the gray-headed fella watch the 2 gentlemen, this is an interesting situation here because he is scrutinizing them, and these people over here are watching very closely. This is Susan Knox. It's Monday, November the 16th at Jim Miller Park. It's about 4:30 in the afternoon. They've just announced that all ballot counting has been complete, and I just saw 3 boxes go around the corner, and I heard the girl with the long eyelashes say we're missing 4 boxes. So all I'm doing is reporting what I'm seeing. Very disturbing. This is Susan Knox. It is Monday, November the 16th at Jim Miller Park. Why don't you just tell us what you saw, Ellis?
Hi, Susan. Thank you for your time today. Yes, I was asked to come up here and observe the vote counting in Cobb County. I enjoyed walking around doing that. Saw that there were 4 RNC members walking around, 1 member per 10 tables. It was very difficult to actually see what was going on, and when you actually got close enough to look at the name that was on the ballot, one of the workers would walk up to you and tell you that you had to back away. Of course, the paper that they want you to sign says that you can actually view the ballot enough to see the names, but then the actual county workers will not allow you to do that. After that process was completed, I asked the director of Cobb County voting system about the tabulation of the votes themselves. She directed me to an adjacent room and said that they were being monitored by the DNC and the RNC members. And I asked if I could go over there and look, and she said, yes, you could. I did. And when I looked over there, there was not a single monitor anywhere near any of the tables with the people that were doing the tabulation. So there were 2 people that I saw per table adding the votes on the computer system, but there were no observers, whether it be Republican or Democrat, actually verifying the addition of those numbers. To me, that's not transparency.
And are you saying that that is the final count that they're going to give for the state of Georgia?
That appears to be the final count that they are going to turn over to the Secretary of State and say that Cobb County has verified the vote.
Supposedly where they rolled the boxes in with the blue sheets, and I was just told that there is no monitoring going on whatsoever for people entering in the numbers into the computer system here. There's no monitors allowed. This is ridiculous. There is no oversight whatsoever of the numbers that are being tallied. This is Susan Knox. I am in Cobb County, Jim Miller Park. Friday morning, November 20th. Here is a shredding and recycling right here outside where the ballots are. Oh my God. Jim Miller Park. Shredding and recycling. Susan Knox. November the 20th, Friday morning. I'm watching all of these ballots being shredded now. Unbelievable. Let's just move up and let's see what else is going out. Yep, here we go. What are they shredding? Massive amounts of ballots right there going out.
Cobb County 911, what's the location of your emergency?
I am at Jim Miller Park, Marietta, I guess, East Cobb. Jim Miller Park Pavilion.
Let me see if I have that in my system. Is that on Callaway Road?
Yes, it is.
Okay, what's your name?
Susan Knox, KNOS.
What's your phone number? Tell me exactly what happened.
There is a shredding machine outside of the area where we had an election, and I need a policeman, please, here ASAP.
I'm sorry, you said there's a shredding machine outside of what?
Outside of the area where all the ballots were counted for this election.
Oh.
They're shredding ballots.
Okay. Do you see somebody currently shredding ballots, or you just see the
Yes,
shredding
I do. I see them shredding ballots as I speak to you right now.
Okay, 1 second. All right, and I need to get the people's descriptions. Are they male or female?
Male, black guy, A1 shredding. And ma'am,
so there's a company name. You said wait, you said A1 shredding. So there's a company out there.
Yes. And the truck number is 15.
Okay.
And ma'am, time is of the essence, please.
Ma'am, I'm getting a call put in. That's why I'm asking you these questions, so they'll know who they're coming to look for.
Okay. Well, I hope they'll come ASAP, please.
And that truck, I need to get the description of the truck. What's the color, make, and model?
White. It's got green on the side. It's got A1 on the side.
Is it a box truck? Is it a pickup truck? What is it?
It's a shredding machine truck. It's a box truck. It's a big, huge truck. Ma'am, I need to go video this. Will you send a cop now, please? A policeman, please?
All right. Well, don't approach that person and don't disturb anything at the scene. An officer will be dispatched as soon as possible. Did you want officers to meet with you or to just go and speak with the gentleman?
Just come right in.
Cobb County 911. What's the location of the emergency?
Yes, I'm at Jim Miller Park, and I called a while back, and we need a policeman here now, please. Jim Miller Park.
Ma'am, what's your name?
Susan Knox.
And what's the phone number you're calling in from? Okay, tell me exactly what happened.
There is a shredding machine outside the door of Jim Miller Park where the ballots are, and I need a policeman here like 10 minutes ago, and I called and nothing's happened. Would you please tell somebody it's an emergency and we need them here now?
Oh, okay. So I do see the call in for service. Our officers are aware. Looks like they're busy in that area. Now, you said it's going to be reference a black male with a white shredding machine truck?
Yep. It's got green and blue on the side.
Okay. Does anybody have any weapons?
I don't know. I'm not close enough. All I can tell you is there's a shredding machine outside of an election office in Cobb County at Jim Miller Park. So would you please send an officer ASAP?
So, ma'am, hang on 1 second.
Yes.
We're going to send our first available unit. The sergeant is already aware of the call. The units are busy in that area. Now, are you going to stand by for them?
I would think that the presidential election would be pretty much as important as anything in our country for a policeman in Cobb County to get over to Jim Miller Park
yes,
right
ma'am.
now, ma'am.
Okay. Are you going to wait for the officers?
Yes, I am.
What color and type of vehicle will you be in? All right. Is that a sedan, truck, or SUV?
A sedan. And the man with the elections office got the shredding guy to take the picture of my license plate.
Okay. All right. Now, just to ensure everyone's safety, have you or anyone there been diagnosed with or experiencing symptoms of coronavirus?
Ma'am, no, ma'am, I haven't. No,
okay.
I haven't.
So we'll go ahead and update the sergeant with this information, and again, we'll send our first available unit. Just give us a call back if anything changes, okay?
I've already called once. We need a policeman here now, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. We'll let the sergeant know.
Pulling off. The truck is pulling off.
Okay, so now it's leaving.
What?
You said now it's leaving?
It's backing up, yes. So it looks like it's leaving.
Okay. So we'll go ahead and update on the call as well. And we'll have a unit meet with you, but just call us if anything changes, okay?
Okay.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Susan Knox, November 20th. Jim Miller Park, there goes the shredding truck out the gate right there that I saw shredding ballots, and I called the police twice. No one came. They just shredded many garbage can full of ballots, and he's pulling out. Sally Grubbs is in front of me, and she's following the truck as well.